Hey, welcome to Appthropology, the podcast where we chat with the people behind awesome mobile apps. We'll look to understand the biggest lessons they've learned, bringing value to people, and we'll dive into interesting stories and insights about how they build and who they build for. I am your host, Jim Lorraine, head of growth at AMP.
And I'm Paul, data scientist and co-founder of AMP.
All right, and today we have Sean Collins from BILT Rewards. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, thanks. How you guys doing?
Awesome. How are you?
Doing well.
Awesome. So, BILT Rewards is a pretty sweet concept. I spent last night going down the rabbit hole checking it out. We're going to get into it later because I can literally see no downside for anybody to ever use BILT Rewards. So, would you mind giving us the quick overview of what is BILT Rewards and a little bit about how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There are no downsides. So we have two products. We have a rewards program, which is our main kind of pillar. And then we have a credit card. And so the concept or the problem we're trying to solve is that paying rent has gotten exorbitantly expensive. And while it's most Americans' number one expense, it's the only expense they can't put on a credit card and can't get points or rewards for. And so we changed that. And then home buying is also one of the most, that's the American dream is buy your home. And those prices have gotten so exorbitant. So we worked and we made it so we have the first loyalty point ever you can use towards a down payment on a home. You can use your points towards rent, and you can pay your rent on the card with no transaction fees. Plus, you can use your points like any credit card point you would have for travel and all sorts of other stuff that we have, especially for our members.
That's awesome. So how are the mechanics? How do the mechanics of it work? So as a user, it seems pretty straightforward. You sign up, you pay your rent, you get rewards on the rent you pay. What's the incentive for the property to participate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we only need property participation for the rewards only program. So the way the rewards only program works, we've created this alliance of property managers across the country called the BILT Rewards Alliance. And if your property joins that, their members can pay rent through our app, both web or mobile app. And then they just get points. They get 250 points every time they pay rent. They can also opt in to have their rent reported to the credit bureau. So your rent actually helps to build your credit score.
Wow.
And so there's no commitment needed. Nothing changes. They just log into whatever their payment portal is, click pay rent. It takes you to an iframe of BILT and you can pay your rent without leaving your portal. And so there's no downside for its members, and the buildings get, a white labeled rewards program, so they can now incentivize their members or their residents to live there. And they can start to incentivize them for doing things like signing leases, moving in early, or giving them notice they're going to move out so they can start to plan kind of their resident workflow. And then any other behavior they want to give points for, they can give those points to their members. And on top of which, because we aren't charging transaction fees on rent, they can save millions of dollars because they're not paying, 3% on every fee that they process.
That sounds too good to be true, Sean. There's got to be a catch, Sean. Where's the catch?
There is no catch. That's what's great about this. So on the credit card side, you don't need to you can live anywhere in the country. If you pay through a check, we will literally mail a check to your landlord. If you pay through a portal, we will give you that doesn't accept credit cards. We will give you a bank account that corrects straight to your credit card, and so you can pay through ACH without getting a card fee and still get your points. And we just won we just won the best no annual fee credit card as voted by readers of the Points Guy. And so, in order to not have this be an annual fee credit card, the only restriction we have is that you have to make 5 transactions every statement period. There's no dollar amount that those have to be. You just have to use your card 5 times, including rent, to earn all your points. If you don't use 5, you get 250 points for paying rent, but you just don't get your other points.
Okay, all right, Paul, save me. I'm about to buy a card.
I'm hearing So I'm hearing like two things, right? There's the functionality and the convenience of the payment process and being able to do that more flexibly, right? Through the bank account functionality, through the card, et cetera. And then there's the rewards in the sense of there's the long-term gain and the fact that you're contributing to something that this sort of this benefit over time. So these are two strong value propositions, and they're definitely not the same thing, right? They're distinct. Now, the second one is built into the name of the company, BILT Rewards. But I heard you, so just some context, right? So we met at MAU Vegas 22, right, in this past year, and I was hearing you kind of talk a little bit about BILT and what you guys are doing, and you made this really perceptive, like I thought, really interesting assessment about customers and users' perception of that concept of rewards and how that affected their ability to really embrace and take advantage of it. So I'm wondering, maybe that's one of the an interesting thing there. Can you restate a little bit about that, if that's still your view, or if the data still shows that, and then sort of say, what is the sequence between these two value propositions? Do customers get both of them at the same time, or is there a path that sort of lets you say, come in for the convenience, stay for the long-term value, or come in for the long-term value and then realize how convenient it is, and then let that convenience become part of the habit? Like, break that down, those two things, but also first start by telling us a little bit about that issue with the concept of rewards.
Yeah. So what Paul's talking about, we ran some tests earlier, I guess Q2 of this year, where we were just kind of testing nomenclature, and we found that engagement with our emails was better if we did not call it rewards, if we called it other synonyms of rewards like points or those kind of things. And so we made the call then to just use the word rewards less often, but it's kind of inconvenient since that's in our company name. And we aren't going to rebrand the company because of some open rate tests that we ran. But what we've found is it's sort of become a little convenient and easy for us, because it's not the BILT Rewards MasterCard, it's the BILT MasterCard and BILT Rewards. And so it just kind of becomes easier to call it BILT in general. Everyone prefers a shorter name. It simplifies and makes it so we don't necessarily have to distinguish between the two. And so we've sort of just gotten to calling it, the BILT app, join BILT, kind of referring to ourselves just as BILT. And then we use rewards sort of to specify, hey, this is the loyalty only program. You don't have the card, whether you didn't apply or you didn't get it. And this is the BILT MasterCard, which we always specify as BILT MasterCard.
Got it. And do you have any intuition or inferences about why is any, and we'll take the data on what it is, right? It is a limited experiment that you ran, but a lot of times really profound things can be learned from limited experiments. So I'm just curious, like, do you have an intuition or an inference that you'd make about potentially what might be a limitation of that concept? And I think this is key, because over and over and over again, we see language and positioning be a key thing for a business. Do they have a mental model, a way of thinking and speaking about the value proposition of a company or an app? You have any thoughts there, or is it just, do you think it really is just a quirk of the sample?
So I just want to caveat that we haven't validated this through any user research or interviews or anything like that. Yes. This is just Sean Collins's 2 cents. But
yes,
I personally think it's already a pretty groundbreaking concept to get something back on paying your rent. And I think calling it points makes it easier to understand okay, it's I'm just getting credit card points. Rewards, I think you kind of associate with a different level of thing. It feels more like you're going to be getting a tangible gift.
Like a t-shirt or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, listen, the one thing I don't need is a t-shirt for paying my rent.
or 10% off my next trip to Disney World.
Exactly. So I think points makes it sound like something that you're familiar with, where you're saying, okay, I'm going to earn these and I can use them however I want. Whereas rewards potentially sounds more like we have chosen what you will get, or you'll unlock some sort of little discount code, like you're saying, that isn't actually going to save me anything because I'm not spending there anyways, or whatever.
Fascinating. Okay.
So this,
and the follow-up, sorry, because I just, what is that dynamic between those two? Do you see it as sort of parallel, like mutually reinforcing? Any thoughts there on?
James, I'll answer that in a second, Paul. What were you going to say, James?
Oh, I was more curious on, so this was an email open rate test? Like that you were testing email opens? Like just curious, how did you
it a couple ways. So
yeah, I was going to say, how did you decide to run that test? And like, of all things, to test rewards versus, like how does that decision tree happen?
It started in subject lines. And so honestly, it started through trying to make character counts work without them being truncated. And so that was really the impetus for it. Was like, I found if that rewards is longer than points. And so I could get more other characters before the word points. And so we had 2 different subject lines, saw some differences, but like the messaging was the same, just the wording was a little different. So then we tried doing it, in a shorter one so that the full word would fit, with rewards versus points, saw the same trends. Then we're okay. Anytime you're doing exploratory testing, right? Like the moment you see something starts to be correlated with a change, then you need to test other places and see, like, does this hold true, or is it isolated to the subject line or whatever? So then we brought it into the messaging of the email itself. And so we just kind of kept bringing it down to make it a bigger and bigger piece. And the pattern just kind of continued.
That's awesome. This is like Ivory Soap and Post-it notes, right? Like the best discoveries happen by accident.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, I always tend to perk up and trust a little bit more when someone casts doubt on their, like when they suspend confidence at the beginning. Because like when you said this originally, I was like, oh yeah, you ran a simple test, right? But clearly you followed through on several different levels, right? But it's exactly the fact that that still you're not overconfident in that. I think that so side note.
And it is important to note, like, all these were with like leads or prospects. So this wasn't tested on existing members who are really familiar with the product. It was people who are still learning what is BILT and what will it do for me.
Mm-hmm. I want to get back to Paul's question, but the other thing that this kind of blows my mind is, like, if you didn't have the character count limit, you wouldn't have done it. Which means there are like 1,000 other things out there that could probably improve as well, but we have no idea. You know what I mean? Like so this is the part that's like, what do you do when you can do everything, right? But
when, like, anytime you're thinking about what should we test next, right? You have this huge list of these glorious, brilliant ideas that have just been festering, and then you find out that the best ones come from stupid limitations like Google truncating my subject line, especially on mobile, and it starts at stupid spots, right? Like, we know that 52% of our audience is using the Gmail app. We know that 80% of our audience is reading most of our emails on mobile. So everything we do has to be done towards mobile character counts, we have to design emails thinking about Gmail dark mode more than, Apple Mail dark mode, because Gmail doesn't accept dark mode media queries. And so, like, even at very simple levels, the limitations and constraints that are put on you are what kind of dictate what you can do.
I've always heard creativity breeds constraint, other way around. Constraint breeds creativity. And it's very true, though. You know what I mean? Because it forces you to be different. So
exactly.
Paul, you had a great question. You were saying the long-term and short-term effects, do they bounce off each other? Quick points here versus long rewards, or how do you position those two? So how do you think those interplay, Sean?
Well, Paul, you were asking about ease versus kind of value, right?
I was hypothesizing that I was hearing 2 core value propositions, which is the functionality of paying paying your rent, which is this recurring thing that you do, and it's annoying. Like every apartment I've ever had was annoying. The payment process was annoying. So there's that. And then, but then there's this longer term thing that you are actually somehow investing and you're creating value that is long term in this thing that is otherwise, just money out the door for that month of shelter. And yeah, those seem like the two core things. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of other little benefits in terms of what you can do with those things and points, et cetera. But those seem like the two core ones. And I was just curious, how do you think about it in terms of when you're bringing customers in and then, their period of being your customer? How do those two play? Is one the lead and then the other is the follow, or is it both ways, or do they happen in parallel? Or, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it actually is, so far seems like it's different for the two products. So for the rewards only program, ease is the most important piece. So the simpler we can make it, the more it can be embedded into your workflow and what you're already doing, the better adoption is. People who are already paying rent for a building and are told, hey, if you get a separate app and download that and then set up your payments there, that there's just some disconnect of like, yeah, that's more work than I need to do. So really having, being a part of the payment flow, and the more we've gotten buildings to speak, this is how we pay rent, the more effective that has been, which is great because like you were saying, there is not a downside to paying rent through us. And so just by changing a slight behavior, you're actually getting something instead of getting nothing. Those are your two options. Like genuinely just either get points or don't get points. You're paying rent either way. On the card side, it's more of a demonstration of value that hooks people. And then I find this every time I talk to someone, it's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I would totally get one, but I pay this way. And so that's always the blocker. And I have to tell them, like, listen, I know you want to think you're unique, but a lot of people pay that way. And we have built a feature so that you can pay that way. Like almost any way you pay rent, we will cover it. I'm not going to send an envelope of cash or something like that, but we do mail checks. So like BILT literally mails my check to my landlord every month because I live in Brooklyn in an old Italian neighborhood where they don't have online portals. If you pay through a portal, we've got you. If you pay through, any number of things, we've got you.
That's cool. So they just interact with the app and you guys handle the check. That's
exactly.
huge.
And like, how much easier is that now? Like mailing a check is ridiculous. Like the only reason I have stamps in my house is because I used to have to mail a check. And now I just have an app. Everything's done there. You can set up auto pay. You can set up auto payments so that you're using your points towards rent every month. And so you literally don't even have to think about this. You can just be taking money off of your rent bill every single month automatic. Like that's incredible. And then, we've got a brilliant point hacker who works for us, who wrote for the Points Guy for years. And so he has a whole content series in our app about how to get your, the most travel value out of your points. You can use your points on Amazon. We custom curate an art and decor collection that rotates. You can book fitness classes with SoulCycle, with Rumble, with Y7, with Solid Core. And there's just however you want to use your points, we also have that covered for you.
Yeah. So you're getting into my next thought here, and I was going to ask about this. So the relationship to the app, the ideal customer lifecycle. So the app is more than just checking your balance. The app is more than just setting up your payments, right? That's your portal to all the rewards. So like, what's the ideal, I guess, user life cycle? It's not like you said, you join it, you set up your payment method, right? You connect your apartment or wherever you're renting from in your payment system. And then what?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of options. I mean, like the interesting thing is there's seems to be just less churn than, I guess a software product or an e-commerce product or something like that, right? Like you've gone through trouble, you've gotten a credit card, you're approved for it. because there's no annual fee, there's no reason to cancel this card. And so it gives us the ability to really think about like education first. We don't ever, like, as a mission-driven company hoping to help people own homes someday, I'm not trying to encourage you to spend irresponsibly or to do anything that's going to be counter to building your credit and building your savings and building this pathway. And so we try and spend a lot of time just teaching you all the features and benefits you have, right? So like with our card, you get some incredible benefits courtesy of MasterCard. So, like travel delay protection and purchase protection and cell phone insurance and stuff like that. Then we have all those transfer partners I just talked about. Those are all unique. And then we have ways to, report your rent as part of your credit. We have ways to reduce. So if you're putting rent on a credit card, that's using up a lot of your credit limit theoretically, right? So we've built a feature that lets you pay with our card or an app, but it does a direct deposit or direct withdrawal from your bank account so that it never hits your credit card balance. So you aren't using up that balance room. You aren't carrying more load on your credit. So we have like all these features to try and help you build your credit score and build your credit history and spend responsibly. And so a lot of it's just education. And so linking them, you get points for linking if you have a loyalty account with any of our transfer partners, like United or an American, we'll give you points for linking those. We give you some free classes with Y7 as soon as you join. So teaching you about those benefits. We have a travel portal so you can shop for trips and pay with cash or with points. So educating you on how that works. We have a really cool new feature on home section. So you can plug in what you're paying in rent and where you want to live. And we will show you homes in that area that you can afford based off of your credit score. So the projected rate you would have on your mortgage and trying to keep that solid with your rent payment and show you homes that you can afford right now. And then we can simulate what would happen if you improved your credit score a little bit. And so we can help you try and understand how do you build your credit score to afford a level up above what you can afford now. And so a lot of it's just education and trying to show people all the things you can do in our app to make what is one of the most complicated, complex, yet somehow essential parts of our life and buying a home, make that easier. And most people buy a home one time in their life if they ever do. And so we're trying to help you navigate a very complex, very expensive, somewhat risky endeavor and do that better and easier.
I feel like you never know how much a house payment is until you buy the house. Like that was always my biggest frustration. The first house I bought was so intimidating because you have a ball. Everyone kind of has a ballpark, but you don't know until you actually buy the house. At which point you're like,
right.
It's too late. So that's brilliant. If you don't mind,
when you look at it, you do the math yourself, and I need calculators and computers to tell me how to do math. So I think I could probably afford that, and then you find out you need insurance, and there's going to be interest, and there's going to be repair fee, HOA fees and taxes. You're like, okay, I guess I can't afford anything now.
Yeah. No, and it's like my summer taxes and winter taxes are different. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but my summer taxes are like half what my winter taxes are. I don't know how that all works. But yeah, it's super weird.
I would have thought that you would part of your tax for living in Michigan in winter would be just the cold.
No, I donate a lot of money to the propane company because actually I'm not even on natural gas. I'm on propane. So, you have to fill that tank every few months, and it's like a $700, $800 fill. So anyway, but enough about me. No, I'm curious if you don't mind me asking. I want to skip ahead a little bit. So again, it sounds like you have the dream job in lifecycle marketing for a product like this. Like, again, it's a high commitment product. I have the card. There's no annual fee. There's not really a reason for me to get rid of the card. I'm using it automated in my flow to pay rent, so I'm not really thinking about it necessarily. So what, if you don't mind being a little transparent, what are your biggest struggles in a lifecycle role for this type of product? Is it purely just educating people on new things they can do, or what? I imagine your churn's pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky. So context for anyone who doesn't know BILT, we've been around just about a year. So even just conceptually, it would be crazy for churn to be the main problem on my plate right now. Like that would mean I'm at the wrong company. But so really it has been education. It has been teaching people and convincing them that there isn't a catch. Like this is truly a no-brainer of a product. Like the closest thing to a catch again is that you have to make 5 transactions on your card a month. You could truly just do all your subscriptions and you're hitting 5 and there you go. And you're still getting thousands of points a month. So I think that's been the main piece I've focused on. I'm a big believer that the onboarding journey is the most important thing that a lifecycle marketer can do, to get people to really believe in the product, believe in the brand, feel connected to it, understand the use cases and what makes it special for them, understand what their options are. Every product has some level of complexity. So trying to simplify that and demystify that. You're also competing with thousands of other brands and apps who are in their inbox and sending pushes and emails and texts. So breaking through the noise. And also people don't really like to think about money, right? So trying to tell people let's talk about money is already uncomfortable for a lot of people. I think there's inherently some distrust of fintech startups, probably for good reason, but
so you've dropped a couple of these, but dig into this a little bit deeper. So your main job is education and like you do that through the onboarding journey. But where are the tactical challenges in that? Is it deciding what people need to be educated about? Is the sequence of what they need to be educated about? Or is it sort of figuring out what is the content of that education? Or where's the job to be done for you when it comes to education? And I think this is really relevant for a lot of apps. That's the right reason I'm asking. It's like a lot of folks have an education job, which is helping customers, especially when it's such a new value proposition, understand how can I utilize this really fully and get the most value out of it.
So, I think when I try and think about what's the proof of any message working, right? Like, is every single message you send, you shouldn't be wasting your recipient's time. So if there's not a deliberate action that they should take as a result of this, just don't send the message and save yourself a couple hours of work and don't even worry about it. Like there shouldn't be a weekly email just for the sake of a weekly email. There should be things that are valuable to the person when they need to do something or learn something. And so trying to figure out what is the proof that this message has been absorbed and has been learned, I think is different for different products. For something like us, there's a level of reminding that needs to happen because you may have joined being like, right, I can save up my points and use them towards a down payment on a house. That's amazing. 3 months later, when you're thinking about transferring your points or using your points one way, did you forget about that? Or, are you using another card because you want an extra 1x on a category when those points aren't going to be able to be used for this? So why not, maybe you lose 1x on groceries or something like that, but in the grand scheme of things, who cares? And so kind of reminding what those value props are and kind of being ever present there and helping to build in the other habits. But when you look like not necessarily at BILT, right? I think you want to figure out what is the number one behavior that you need a member or a user to have. And like that should be how you're counting your active users. Like maybe it's just opening the app, but unless your app is just content where they're just scrolling, like probably not. And so it's figuring out what is that action, what is that cadence that proves that they are an active user, and then optimizing for that. And then once they start to build that habit and become a solid user, then you're looking for two things as a lifecycle marketer. You're looking to build breadth of use, so adding use cases and saying, hey, this was the app I was using to kill 5 minutes on my commute, but now it's also the app I use to kill 10 minutes during meetings when I'm not paying attention. Or, this is the app that I was using to do a little bit of language learning, but I also am now going to add in listening to a podcast instead of just doing a lesson a day. Or I was just learning stretching, but now I'm going to also use this to plan and track my meals. So you're adding another use case, or you're increasing depth of usage. And so that's either frequency or duration. And so those are the two things you're always trying to grow, to build a stickier, and like, if you believe in your product, there's nothing sketchy about that. You're trying to deliver more value, by getting people to use more of the features that people have worked their butts off to build for their users. And so I think it's really that is you should focus on a single one, the one that is most correlated with driving value. And then you add breadth or depth, as people are engaged. And then as they start to reduce their engagement, then you start to pare it back. Right. And so, if suddenly someone started logging their meals and is no longer logging meals, and they're also not working out as much, focus on whichever one of those is the core value prop and get them back to that before you focus on, hey, you haven't logged a meal. Like, who cares if they joined overall for fitness and that was a nice to have, then get them back to working out.
That's a really elegant framework. Breadth of use and depth of use. I'm going to take that one.
I like that you said,
I look forward to the next one about that.
We'll work on it. I like that you said, find the optimal activity in the app and then optimize for that. Never has such complexity been put into 3 words. Optimize for that. Like, oh, okay, great. I'll get right on that. I know there's an art to that. There's so much art and depth in that, those 3 words that we could probably, that could be the next ebook right there.
But that's the fun part, right? Is trying to figure out why things aren't going the way you want them to, or the way you think they should, and testing solutions to adjust.
We might be,
that's the fun
might be
part.
frozen for a minute.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, I think you had something. We can see you, by the way. You're all good. I think you had something relating to speaking about how to get that breadth and depth into how you relate, Sean, with the partners. So with the partners that BILT is teamed up with, and the different supply and acquisition teams. So do you wanna ask that one, Paul?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm also quite curious about this. About the kind of, once you dive into this breadth and depth of use, once you have, and you figured out what that core first value proposition, that the first action that you want a user to take, and then you kind of figure out the depth for that. You figure out what the next thing is, which is breadth. But it sounds like in the context of BILT, there's this marketplace, there's this stream of content, and this. Sean referred to the points guy early on, and I'm really curious to hear as well as what are the insights from Lifecycle and how do those feed into the decision about how to build that marketplace? Because I'm sure that for BILT, that's a key operational and BD and strategic decision, and it's really interesting. I always find to see how teams work together, to make their different functions work better. And I think you can always go out, and I've seen this with so many marketplace apps where you go out and you add more and more content, and you find more and more merchants and more vendors to add them to that platform. And it's interesting if you think about it from the user perspective and what you're observing about how users are engaging with that content. How does that feed back into that acquisition process?
Yeah. So I'm going to try not to throw shade at other credit card companies too much here, but I think a lot of them do exactly what you said and add just so many offers to this marketplace, and they're not usually that enticing of offers. It's like, hey, spend $100 and get $5 back at this place you've never shopped before. And there's 100 options of those for me to scroll through infinitely and just not get any value from. So we try and be much, much more deliberate with the partnerships we bring on, and focus more on having strong, deep partnerships that provide a lot of value than having a plethora of different ones. So although I listed off a bunch of ways you can use your points, you know, it is highly curated, and the offers are not change your spending behavior in order to get a small discount. It's ways you can use your points. It's we've created this holiday called Rent Day. So the first of every month, and the days leading up to it, we start to roll out some fun limited time benefits and offers. And then on Rent Day, it's all your point multipliers are double except for rent. So you get 6x on dining, 4x on travel, 2x on your other spend. You can bring a friend to SoulCycle for free. We had like a status challenge with United. So you could take your BILT status and use that to level up United status. Double your point transfer to IHG hotels. So we do cool things with existing partners that are focused on value to you and not necessarily value to us, right? Like all those things I listed actually negatively hurt our bottom line. Giving you more points just costs us money. Doubling your transfer to a partner just costs us and the partner money, but it provides you a lot of value and makes it more engaging and makes you start to see what these other transfer partners are and understand kind of what this ecosystem is that you're now a member of. Whereas, you know, not to say anything negative about flowers.com, but like, I don't need $10 off at flowers.com every month. It's certainly not if I spend $100 to get it. Like that doesn't help me personally. I'm sure it helps somebody out there, but, so we focus on that. Like, how can we provide you more value with really cool, engaging partnerships that are the brands you really actually are already using as one of our members. And so we've tried to find some of the top airlines, the top hotel chains, some really incredible boutique fitness brands. And then, I mean, Amazon everyone shops on Amazon. So being able to use your points there makes it immediately valuable. Being able to use your points towards rent is immediately valuable. So that's kind of what we focus on it is what are the most engaging ones for our members and how can we add more value there as opposed to what salesperson pitched us on a great offer that this partner will pay for. And I think that's how a lot of other credit cards find these partnerships and these offers, as brands will sell them on it. Whereas we take the opposite approach. Like, what would Paul get value from? Great. Let's figure out how we can give him that value. And so that's kind of the approach we take.
That's cool. It's good customer focus. Can't go wrong.
It's really nice. Since everyone who works here is our own customer, it sounds selfless to be customer focused, but it's really just me trying to figure out how I can get the most value in my day.
Oh man. I was going to say I could probably cap out that $100 to flowers.com, but then again, like I feel like one flower at flowers.com is about $100. So that's what it feels like anyway. Oh, cool.
And those guys are going to hate us.
I'm curious. No, we'll make sure they don't listen to this one. I am curious. So you've done lifecycle marketing in a few different places. You've done the e-commerce side. You were in electrification, which is really interesting. So I imagine user adoption is quite differently there. What things have you've kind of gone over the basic principles, right? So find what activates a user, focus on breadth, focus on depth. What has been kind of unique between each of those roles and kind of where you are now? Is there some common threads, or is it like there's vast differences in how you approach each one?
I mean, I think if there's vast differences, it's just from having spent a different amount of years and having different experience. I think generally when I've always looked for companies that I can believe in, that I think provide genuine value to their customers or their members or their users, and are causes I can get behind. Like, I'm a workaholic. And so if I'm going to be spending a ton of time on a problem, like I would like it to be a problem that's worth solving as opposed to, one that's just paying me. Cause I think you can make any problem interesting. So why not solve real problems? So that's been like how I've kind of found companies and found roles, is I have to believe in the company, and the product. So that's like the through line. And I think the difference has been, I mean, the audience and what you're selling. When I was agency side, it was e-commerce primarily. So the buyer's journey, the decision timeline and decision cycle is substantially different. And also retention is substantially different on the e-commerce side, right? Like brands want to think that people are super deliberate and super deliberately loyal. And certainly those people exist who only buy from Carhartt or only buy from Lulu or whatever. But for the most part, people want something that's cool. They want something comfortable. They don't want to pay a lot for it. And so there you aren't going to be having weekly purchases. And that's why I think you saw every brand that has a Shopify site try and do subscriptions and realize that we don't need subscriptions to everything. So that was, a very different problem set than trying to convince people to switch from riding in a gas powered car to using an electric moped or an electric bike or taking an electric ride share. Substantially different problem set and decision cycle and user journey and stickiness and what is retention. And that's substantially different than paying rent, getting a credit card, saving up to buy a home. And that's just a completely different journey and problem set. So it's the same concepts and theories, but in practice, they barely touch each other.
I like your thought on retention, because it's true. Because you have something that is truly retention. You have a card. You sign up for a card. You set up a system that pays. There's something tangible you have even. But we've been talking forever about the concept of retention in e-commerce. It's not a thing. It's that.
Yeah.
Like you said, there are those super fans, right? That like they're super fans. But to a lot of people, it's like, you just have the item that I want, but I might find that item somewhere else next time.
Right. And even like your margins aren't going to be the same on if you like how many Shopify sellers sell on Shopify and on Amazon, right? Like your margins aren't the same. The marketing cost is not the same. The user journey is not the same. So, I think when you go back to, when you look at a SaaS product, right? Or even, a mobile SaaS and like just an app, you can start to say, hey, here is what our customer lifetime generally looks like. Here's what customer lifetime value generally looks like with bands of differences. And you can start to segment that out. When you're looking at e-commerce, people would always talk about like extending lifetime value. And you sort of just have to put a time frame on that, because like there's also you can't say someone's forever churned now. Like they didn't have to delete an app or unsubscribe. They can unchurn anytime they come back and buy from you. And most people aren't unsubscribing from emails. They just have a promotions tab with 30,000 emails that they sometimes click over to. So calling someone churned in e-commerce is also, I think, sort of silly, unless you are a logical subscription product. Then we can talk about lifetime value and churn. But otherwise, I think you got to put a time frame on it for e-commerce and say, hey, we're looking at, instead of lifetime value, it's CAC to payback, or AOV to CAC even, or something like that. Or you could say 3-month LTV or 1 year, maybe you cap it there and say, if we don't get X amount from someone within 3, 6, 9, 12 months, anything beyond that is unpredictable. We can't forecast it. And so it shouldn't be part of our projections.
Yeah. Man, this is super interesting too. We have really good
as well, right? Like
breadth.
Yeah. In the sense that, the question can be, is there something else that they can find value? Is like ultimately every company has this imperative to go wide, because there is a limit on the depth, in the sense that I'm not going to buy flowers. I'm not going to buy new running shoes more than once every 6 months or 9 months or 12 months or 2 years, whatever that frequency is, depending on how much you run. And so you have to figure out that, well, you're also going to need to buy socks and then you realize, well, you're running and you listen to music. So earphones, and figuring out what that next one is, and what the sequence is. And that becomes, part of that life cycle of that journey. And then where I feel like it breaks down is the fact that we then hypothesize that there is, first we buy the shoes and then we buy the earphones. Whereas someone else has the shoes, but there's an opportunity to buy the earphones. So it kind of you end up with this mass rather than this linear sequence of a journey. So I think you're totally right that you have to put a time cap on it. But do you have to put the time cap on it for a time limit or a time marker for one thing, and then for another thing, as you go right in breadth, it's a different time limit? Or how do you handle that emergent complexity? Because I'm not sure you can avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I guess to some extent, who cares, I guess, which is probably not a good answer, but I think the reason you want to know LTV really is you want to understand what you can responsibly pay on the user acquisition side. So if you cap it, the shorter you cap it, the more you can be aggressive on the acquisition side. And then every extension, every follow-on purchase beyond that period is phenomenal, but you aren't using that to increase what you're willing to pay to acquire. So it would almost be on investments. Sometimes we're going to have incredible markets where things are where you're earning 15% on your investments, but if you model off of that, you're going to make some really poor decisions and not enjoy the end of your retirement, whatever the period is, right? So if you plan with constraints, going back to get creative within your constraints, make those as rigid as you can and say, I can only afford to spend $80 to acquire someone because my gross profit on a product, which is our average or highest selling product, is this. So in aggregate, this is what I can reasonably spend to get a sale. And then if I can extend that, I give myself buffer for people who are buying a lower priced item or buying on sale, or for any free products I'm going to give away to influencers and because of customer service issues and whatever. You can extend the value, and no finance team or CEOs ever complain that you're giving too much value or that you're earning too much per customer. It's just a constraint you're putting on your acquisition team to say, if you spend more than this, it is unreasonable to expect us to be profitable off of these sales.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. If you're putting in the context of how do you connect that back to your CAC and your cost, then okay, that makes total sense. There is the second function of lifecycle, right? Which is then okay, great, we've paid off that cost of acquisition, but now let's grow the value. And at that point, you really do want to start to think about, that's why you put it that way, right? That breadth of use is that you've figured out the first use. So now figure out what the second one is. And that's what I mean.
Again, that's all e-commerce, right? Which is way less fun to me than SaaS or apps. I much more enjoy the SaaS side, which is a bit more linear and can be a bit more targeted and planned out in terms of breadth and depth. And you can really curate what an onboarding experience looks like by gating features or having a walkthrough, or, if it's a SaaS, you can even have an onboarding, whether it's live or recorded or guided or whatever. So on the SaaS side, as a lifecycle marketer, I almost feel like on e-commerce, you shouldn't even call it lifecycle marketing. It's almost more like, hey, your email or SMS marketing, or, it's more channel side.
CRM maybe?
Because it is, CRM works. I think there's a lot of ways you could, depending on exactly what your product is and your brand is. I think there's ways different ways you could name it. You could even go so far as to name it like customer experience or something like that. And maybe And what's interesting about quick tangent, what's interesting when you think about how you name a role is think about the implied constraints that gives to the person you hire, right? So if you say, James, you're my email marketer, you are no longer like, don't talk to me about SMS. Don't talk to me about other channels. You're my email guy. If I say you're my customer experience marketer, suddenly you're thinking about the full experience. Maybe it brings in mail. Maybe that brings in like suddenly your purview and your left and right limit are so wide that you can get so much more creative, potentially staggeringly so. But so I think that managers should be deliberate in what they name something and kind of the constraints they put on a role. So that's the first thing. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. There's a lot of value in thinking about how you can extend the buyer's cycle. But at the same time, I think that every extension you make of back to e-commerce, every time you add a new product, that changes your brand, right? If you go from I'm a shoe company to I also sell headphones because that's a parallel, or I guess something you'll use at the same time. At some point, the finance guy is going to say we should be a headphone company because those make us a lot more money and sell a lot higher, and our margins are better. And you actually have a bigger addressable market because more people have ears than run. So you don't have to run to listen to music. So now we're a headphone company who sells shoes. And so like it changes who you are as a brand. So I think that extension, as you look for breadth, you have to be very deliberate. And that's where I think you could make an argument about it becoming lifecycle marketing if you want to, is I think you're more tuning into those other indicators, right? So are they reading your content still? If they're reading your blog or watching your videos or engaging with your emails, like whatever those topics are that they're actually engaging with, those are the right topics to talk to them about. And those are the products to bring to them when they start showing interest in shopping again. Like, I don't need you to be giving me 20% sales all the time for the 5 months right after I bought shoes, because I haven't worn through my shoes yet. But at the end of my shoes life cycle, now as I'm starting to get ready to shop, I would love a discount. Or maybe that's when you start showing me these products again. And until then, it's pump up stuff. It's diet. It's
I feel like you're the Hegel of marketing. We've gone full circle from life cycle not relevant to e-commerce. To me, like, you're making the best case for actually the best form of this for e-commerce is life cycle, because I think that's
yeah, maybe it is. Maybe I was wrong 2 minutes ago, and now I struggle.
We evolve. No, it's really interesting. Two forms of thought, and there's an interesting synthesis there. Yeah, a lot to think about.
Yeah, I like that too. I like the naming because it changes your belief about what you do. I want to probe really hard into where you said. I don't think we have enough time for where you said you want to figure out what those things are that each individual is engaging with, and then hit them with the right thing at the right time when they're about. And I mean, again, that's a few words, and that's very complex to actually enact. But that's exactly it. I think there are a couple interesting things we've done with a few different apps. One of them is traditional e-commerce, and looked at, I'm going to spitball, but it was like 70-something% of users pop in and make one purchase. And we've seen that everywhere, right? And we've seen that in food delivery too, as an example, because I want to get food from a certain place and I install the app and I uninstall it. As far as Uber knows, that's me, because every time I go on a trip, I install it. I get my one trip that I need, and then I uninstall the app immediately, because why do I need to carry it around for, I don't use it that often. They don't serve around where I live. But we see that kind of everywhere. The one single bloop, and then I'm gone. So like how much of a user's lifetime revenue with your app do they spend like the first time they install it? And it's high. The second thing, we worked with another app and found that 84%, I think, of their users were classified as lurking. They have the app. They occasionally do some activity, but they don't like do any meaningful activity or participate. Right. So this is the life cycle thing. When you think of it, we spend so much on acquisition. And I know I'm probably singing your song here, but we spend so much on acquisition to get people in, just to have 84% of them sit, and not participate, not meaningfully participate, or to get them in, they make a single purchase and then they leave. Right. So it's just, harkens your role that Lifecycle is really the lifeblood of a whole lot, not just e-commerce, but a whole lot of apps, because you get all this energy into getting this user base, and then they don't do anything. So anyway,
when it's a double-edged sword, because if they're not doing anything, if they're not getting value, they're also not talking about the value that they're not getting. And the number one strongest channel any marketer has, any product has, is word of mouth. And so if they're not actively using your product, they certainly aren't saying something good about you. They might be having negative word of mouth, but they certainly aren't talking about, oh man, I had this great app I used one time when I was on a trip called Uber.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's I bet those words have never come out of your mouth, James.
Only during this podcast.
That's a cool observation, because I think a lot of times, we often say when it comes to messaging that people think about messaging too often on a 0 to 1 spectrum, where it's like harmless, like it doesn't do any good, to one where it's really good. And then actually it's really more like a negative 1 to 1. And what your point about acquisition there is really interesting as well, because it's sort of like, if you don't have a clear value proposition for this set of users and you bring them in, then they do form a memory of your brand. That memory is, yeah, I tried it, but it was not really there for me. And so that, there's 3 people talking, one of them recommends, one of them says, yeah, I tried it, nothing there for me. That third person hears that negative response. Whereas if they had never been brought into the app, right, they would have just been, I don't know. And then, so it's really interesting to think about that subtle, and it's very hard to measure. So I think most people just don't end up, measuring it, but it's there. It's there. We just haven't figured out how to measure it.
Is that it's so hard to form a second first impression? Like getting that second first impression is really hard, and we're just at the app level, kind of the same theory. But
yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Like, I mean, it's almost like if you were to start building your marketing strategy, your product strategy, you can start. You have to start at one side of the funnel. Like, you can't start at middle of the funnel and try and focus there, right? You're either starting with the product and finding your early core users and optimizing for a small group of people to be super engaged and get a lot of value. Or you take the approach of, if I get enough people using my product, I'll see what are the most popular use cases and I'll talk to people and then build the features for them, right? Those are really the only 2 logical ways to start, is to identify a core group and build for them, and then add use cases to add more people, or to start with a lot of people and figure out which use cases to build and prioritize that way. And what's interesting, Paul, that you were just saying, is like, if you do the second, if you start with a huge group of users and try and figure out use cases, it's going to be much harder with the people that you didn't build for to ever get them back. And so while you might make, so in the value there is, if they're all paying early, that can fund a lot of your product development. It can fund your research. It can fund some growth, which is important. But you're going to have a lot of potentially ideal or ideal adjacent users and customers who are done with you because they tried you once and it wasn't the product for them.
Yeah. I feel like I've had that with restaurants. You want to go here? Nah, I've been there. I didn't like it. And then sometimes you go back and you have a delightful experience, but you're like, I would have never gone there unless this group went there and I just wanted to tag with the group because I've already been there and I didn't like it. Because I had one waitress or a waiter who was snotty or something, like something that doesn't matter or have anything to do with the product.
Same. Yeah. Oh my gosh. If you read review sites, how many of them are so far outside of the control? It'll be like, there was this woman next to me who was yelling. Was the food good though? Like,
it's like, I went there, but someone had just yelled at me and I was having a really bad day and it's a 1 star. It's like,
I'm never flying American because there was a baby on the plane.
Outside, so I shouldn't have, I was cold on the patio and so I'm never going back. It's like, well, order inside or go in spring. Like, everything's fine. Wear a coat.
Oh man, that's so good. We are about at the hour mark, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But I'm curious because you have a great depth of background. So I'm going to ask an incredibly open-ended question. But I'm just curious. So this can be about BILT. This can be about your journey or about the previous experiences that you've had. But kind of in this whole road of life that's led you up to this point, what has been the most interesting thing that you've learned or taken away that our listeners might resonate with or enjoy? How's that?
That's that wasn't on the questions you sent ahead of time. That's interesting that I had no time.
It
to prep
wasn't,
for that
which
one,
is
James.
I kind of love sucker, but because I like the real reaction.
Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I think that you should find something. The number one thing you spend your time on in your life is working, which is either super depressing or super uplifting, depending on the choice you make. Right. And so I think that that's it. Like, are you really willing to accept 50 years of hating 8 to 12 hours of your day, plus the work weekends you work and the dread you feel on Sundays if you don't like your job and the holidays? Are you willing to hate that in order to make a little extra money? I think that's, I mean, I'm sure there's a tipping point, right? If you gave me $1 billion a year to do something I hate, or $10 to do something I love, like, yeah, I'll be sad for $1 billion. That's great. But that's not the choice that you actually are making in real life. So find something that you love and are passionate about. And if that changes, then change, right? Like, I was in the Army for almost 7 years, super proud of my time there. Glad that I did it, learned a lot. It shaped who I am. But when I stopped enjoying that as a job, and then it was time for me to move on. So then I moved into clean tech and had a lot of fun and learned a lot. And I'm proud of what I did there. But there were parts of that were burning me out and I needed to change. And so I changed. And so, there isn't, just like, to bring this back to lifecycle marketing, there's not one single user path. People, you can pivot, you can change, you can add use cases, you can have breadth of use cases. So figure out what you want to do and do it. And like, realistically, like, if you are unhappy, change that, and just maybe it'll take some risk. You have to quit a job or find some new, or take a pay cut, or learn a new skill, or go back to school. But like, it's just not worth it to be unhappy.
I love it. No, that's so good. That's good. I was actually coaching somebody on that, and they were afraid because they saw this job. Like, if I take a job, that's it forever. I have this job. And I'm like, don't think of it that way. You're just adding a skill. Picking up a new job is adding a skill, right? And you just grow in your basket. That's beautiful. And I think you've exemplified that.
Even if it's a bad job, that can, like, you can learn a lot from really terrible experiences, right? Like, I've worked for people that were not good leaders, and so now every day I think, okay, what would this person do? I'm going to deliberately not do that. And I've also worked for incredible people. And so that helps you have a spectrum and understand that there's good and bad to everything. And just because someone's at a level, or because they had an experience, like I said, lifecycle marketing isn't the same here as it was at Revel, as it is at an e-commerce agency. So, like, it's also not just me a role. It's your circumstances. It's your situation.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. I, for the record, can't say anything about my boss on this phone call. All right. He may or may not be also on this phone call. No, just kidding. All right. So that's a wrap. So thank you so much for tuning into the Appthropology podcast. We hope you learned something that'll help inspire your own work. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, leave us a 5-star on Apple Podcasts. And that's all this week. So thank you again, Sean, and we will see you all next week.
Great. Thanks a lot, guys.